say Cool Mine is fairly stand out there in terms of the treatment field.
That's unfortunately in Ireland as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Unfortunately in Ireland as well, we have a treatment modality in a couple of areas whereby it is a 13-week program based on religion, based on typical religion, where people are sent in there, they stay in there, they're detoxed in there, they stay there, do a program, they come out there with any life skills, they don't know where they're going, they don't understand what life is all about, and now I know it works for some, but there's no one here in Ireland that will push things. This is what I find.
And I think, again, because I did the Masters under Shane Butler, and he spoke a lot about that, and it's this whole concept of, you're right, most of the residential treatment providers in this country do have religious roots, and there's another really big problem, and that's subsidiarity. So the government see that, I see the nuns over there, and they're running a treatment, we'll fund them piecemeal when it suits us, but the bottom line is we don't have to do anything about it now because they are. And so you're right, it's not pushed, it just perpetuates. And then you've got people who will attend those types of treatment centres. They will then ascribe to their school of thought in terms of they will get addiction training from them, then they will come back to work for them. So this kind of idea that this is the only way perpetuates, and that's what they do said, it's hammered into people.
But just because,
it's an industry now.
But just because they're religious based doesn't mean that they work through religion. Just from my experience with
But I mean, if we talk about specific rehab centres like Coonborough, I'll name it here in the room, you get up in the morning at 7 o'clock, you go to mass, men on this side, women on this side, you do not look at each other in the eye.
But say Foxford Hope House, which is run by nuns, that's not got any religious base.
But then
and they will send their people on, if the people are willing, they can go on then to a secondary house in Navan, where they do have, they can claim the dole, the social welfare, so they can do a CE scheme, and they'll get life skills, and they have to keep house, and they have to make their own meals and such like. So it is there.
But those things are industries. I would have heard. I remember a couple of years ago here on the radio, 2 different centres. It was like, we'll do it in 28 days. Well, we'll do it in 26 days. We'll let it sold in 28 days. We'll let it sold in.
What's your opinion? Why are you smiling? Or is it just that candy you're sucking?
I think that you get out of it whatever you put into it, and I think some patients will talk about the religious aspect of it, and we find talking to someone about residential treatment and the religion thing going into it. I know that we're in different places and they're not ready for it. They're not interested in what I'm suggesting.
But I think the bottom line for us as treatment people is, to me, you can't be a treatment person. Some people will go for religion and some people go for communism, but you can't be a treatment person if you can only go for one thing. You know what I mean? If you say, you have to be religious, and the person says, well, I'm not religious, then you say, sorry. Being a professional therapist means that you can go with a variety of approach. Do you think? You know what I mean?
I think Irish people are well able to think outside the box. And we were talking about AA today, and I said we both agreed it's not for everybody, and especially in this day and age with that religious aspect and the greater power, and it's out of your control. But I actually know somebody, and it was very successful for her, and she said any time they went on about the greater power and the looking into believing the powers that be, she said, I looked into my heart and I felt it was there somewhere, and I just got rid of all that. She believes in nothing.
But that's asking people
but
a lot.
That's
asking people a lot to say,
she adapted it.
We're going to tell you therapy, but you have to rearrange it in your mind. That's making them go an extra yard.
And it's personal choice and fair play. But in these,
I know,
Coonborough, you are forced to go to mass. You are forced. You do not have freedom of choice. And I'm very anti that. Very,
But in the rooms themselves, you're not forced. Because the rooms are run by the rooms.
No, the rooms are run by the groups, the AA themselves.
Well, actually, you see, that's another kind of a bit of a complicated thing, right? So again, the AA is very balanced in the way it kind of comports itself. But what you find is that individual groups are all going to be distinctly different based on the personalities that are in there. So there are some AA rooms that you will go into and you will be told it is a disease, even though the fellowship itself has a more balanced kind of take on that.
Well, that gets back to a question. Does an organization have principles? Do people believe in them? Do they agree with them?
This is the part that I wanted to just raise the question about earlier, Stanton, was the values are what's important.
Well, I
or
need 4
principles,
values.
whatever word you want to use on it. But we'll call it values for now. The values of an organisation. Okay. First of all, if they're clear, because sometimes they're not clear. So if they're clear. Secondly, then that gets mediated by the staff that are working there, because just because an organisation has a value or a principle, the staff that are working there may not hold that, and certainly will have differing slants on that value. And then the people who are attending that service may be only attending it because it's the only service they can access, and it doesn't fit with their values.
There's a big difference between a client and a professional.
Yeah.
And then there is a question: does an organization have principles, fundamental, principles? Can an organization function if they don't really believe in certain fundamental principles? Can they? Depends what you call fundamental, but and then I guess you have to make a choice if you're going to work for them and say, well, I don't agree with that fundamental principle.
But for a lot of people who are service users in our service, they come to our service because they have a very short list of places that they can get any service from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your job is to respond to their value. They don't have to believe in the principles of the
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
Their job is to just get help. Now there's one.
Can I come on to my question? Yeah. That the idea of, I think, an organization should have, and it's probably has to operate between some goalposts, but the organizational value should always be somewhat inverted, that it's a value of service. We are of service to these people. Now maybe we're only of service to people who want sobriety. That could be an organization's value. Okay.
What do you mean by sobriety?
They want to be abstinent from alcohol and all drugs.
Sobriety
stuff like
doesn't mean that,
Okay.
Sobriety's, AA took over the word, sobriety means not being intoxicated,
Okay.
So sobriety is actually a harm reduction term.
Okay.
Remember, I was talking about being careful about language.
Yeah.
In America, they'll say about somebody, they're not sober, and they mean they took one drink. That's what they mean.
Yeah.
You don't mean
Okay.
that, do you?
Yeah. No, I don't mean that.
So be careful.
In terms of that, okay, that this organization here, that's their value, to have all people who come to their service abstinent from alcohol and other drugs. Fine. We get all the time, though, that those values of that organization, those values of service to people, get messed with by the staff because they're not actually following through on what the values of the organization is. Yeah.
So they're not meeting their own basic principles or values.
They're not.
By the way, another way that comes out in the United States is 12-step rehabs and AA are constantly saying now that they practice motivational interviewing. And how could that be?
Yeah.
They don't let you come in and say,
Yeah.
well, my goal is controlled drinking.
Yeah.
So that shows kind of inauthenticity, which means that they're not really, they don't even believe, they're not standing by their own values. Probably because kind of everybody, even in the United States, everybody kind of knows that's not going to be 100% workable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, that gets back to Shane saying, well, things are changing, AA's still in charge in America, but people are aware everybody's not going to quit drinking,
So if that's some of the ways that the values don't get translated down to the ground.
And sometimes in a way that's, so what, aren't you inclined to say to a 12-step rehab, you're not motivated, aren't you inclined to confront them with that? You're not motivational interviewing as I understand it? Isn't that your reaction? That's my reaction.
Well, that's pretty common. I mean, like, people will say, oh, I'm trained in this, I'm trained in that, I'm trained in the other, as if they do it
so
all
the time. So what do you say to people when they say that to you? I mean, you don't have to get in a fight every day on my behalf, but what do you say to them?
Well, if people say that they're doing it, unless I see evidence otherwise, I kind of go, okay, well, it's good that you're doing that. But most of the time, then, you talk to service users or people who've been to that service or whatever, then they say that's not what happened to me while I was there. So I can recount that to people. Like
I usually
Marie's point a minute ago where she
you allow
said
people to be controlled drink or moderate their drinking. I can't help myself.
Yeah.
I don't believe them.
Yeah. Marie's point a minute ago that she made about, people in some rehabs being forced to go to Catholic Mass, regardless of what religion they are or what belief that they have, And then the same rehab might say, yeah, well, we practice motivational interviewing and we practice this and we practice that and we believe in autonomy for clients and all of that. So you can point out sometimes that people values what it says on the tin isn't what you get inside.
And sometimes you're hoping with the client to make them change, but sometimes with these organizations, they're being duplicitous.
Yeah.
Write a letter to the judge and say, I'm an atheist, are you telling me I have to go to AA? And no judge is going to write down, yes. Everybody understands.
But is that to do with the judge's interpretation of what AA is? Because
not by the time the Supreme Court hasn't decided on it, but 7 district.
Okay.
By the time all the courts have decided that you're not allowed to be a municipal judge and say, oh, to heck with them, I say it's not religious, because the court's decisions have said, if you violate a person's civil rights, so we're good that way. If you violate a person's civil rights in the United States, you're liable for criminal penalties. A judge can be...
In terms of, now this is again my understanding of the higher power concept in AA is that it's not...
Courts, that's what's great about courts.
Religious.
That's what's great about... People always say that.
Tripod there.
The courts say, all the court decisions read, well, we know AA is very effective, we know people love it, but when you say to people, you have to go to a higher power, we count that as religion. That's just religion. It's not, you can debate it, but that's, you can't tell people to turn themselves over a higher power.
But isn't it sad in Ireland that if a person, like Brendan was trying to say, that, and yourself I think, Liam, that if someone hadn't got another place to go, okay, and their family were forcing them into a treatment facility, and that treatment facility is forcing religion on them.
How do you feel about religion personally? Would you feel?
I was waiting for that one.
I sense, a kind of, I agree with you 100%, but you don't like that, huh?
I
mean,
don't
people being
really,
forced into religion.
No, because, what it does then, the person in there is resenting their treatment
We're
straight
right.
away. They're resenting because they're being forced. If not, they have to get out.
Well, there's no clinical explanation you can make. One job I had is that here's the thing that happens in America. It happened, a doctor gets caught, whatever, pilfering pills or drunk driving. They have a board. The board is always made up of guys in AA. And they say to the guy, the doctor, you have to go to a rehab. And the rehabs are all 12-step. And the doctor, let's say he's like a neurosurgeon, he's making, in America, a ton of dough. And he goes, okay, whatever. And he goes there and he sort of thinks, well, whatever. And then they say, you have to believe in a higher power. And the guy says, well, I don't know. That's not the way I roll. And then they say, well, we're going to kick you out and take your medical license. Then they would hire me. Because the guy said, that can't be right. You don't go in and get surgery. And they say, what do you think of higher power? I'm a surgeon. And so then, when I would make a case, well, he would have to have a lawyer because it's usually in another state. The two arguments you make is this board a state representative, in which case they're breaking the law? And the second thing I say is, they have something called informed consent in America. You know that concept?
Yes,
That's where you say, well, we can do A or we can do B. Which do you want to do? You have to tell people that. And ironically, the only place in the world where that didn't take place was like addiction treatment. They'd say, well, we have A and you're going to do A. So it's clinically, the reason they have informed consent is because in general, people are going to do better when they say, oh, I want to do this. That's just the way life works. And it's in therapy, doubly so. If you just say, well, what do you want to do? Then you're more in motivational interviewing. Then if the person doesn't do it, you say, oh, I thought you wanted to do this. Well, if you don't want to do this, what do you want to do? Well, we can do the other thing if you want. That's your motivational key.